This conference will now be
Hello,
recorded.
my name is Dawn Ringrose, and I'm pleased to be presenting to you today on the Canadian results on a global research study that we've been doing over the last 5 years on the topic of organizational excellence. I'd like to thank Ruth Stanley for hosting this session, and I'd also like to introduce Veronica Marquez, who has been working with me on these Canadian results, and will be presenting this same presentation on November 25th in French. My name is Dawn Ringrose, and I'm the Principal of Organizational Excellence Specialists. I've been working in this area since 1990, around the time when excellence models were first introduced. And since that time, I've been working with organizations to improve their performance and transferring knowledge to other professionals so that they can use these wonderful models and in doing their work with organizations. And I've been designing tools to help make the improvement journey in organizations more simple, straightforward, time efficient, and cost effective. This global research study that we've been doing over the last 5 years has been designed to provide a snapshot about the culture of excellence in organizations and the deployment of best management practices. And we've been capturing this data by organization size, industry sector, and region. What's really interesting about it is for the very first time, we're capturing this sort of information, but we're also capturing it from leaders and management and staff and organizations that are self-assessing their organizations, and they have varying levels of knowledge or sophistication with organizational excellence, from those who have never even heard of excellence models right through to those who've been using them and are well oriented in that fashion. This particular presentation takes a closer look at the Canadian data from the study and shows how Canada compares to other countries. And at the end of the day, it really highlights where organizations in Canada are doing well and where they have to concentrate on improvement. And this is all with respect to remaining competitive in the world and making sure that our organizations in Canada are the best that they can be. There's certain tools I'll be mentioning along the way that can be used and may be helpful to those in attendance. So what is organizational excellence? Here's a definition that I came up with when I was submitting a chapter on organizational excellence to Encyclopedia of Public Administration, Public Policy, and Governance for Springer International Publishing. And it's a way I think about organizational excellence and the formula for success that it offers. Now, this study was launched in 2015 by the Organizational Excellence Technical Committee, which is part of the Quality Management Division at ASQ. And it was a team project that the committee wanted to do, and asked if I would lead the study, given the integrated excellence model that I had developed and also the automated assessment and reporting tool that has been provided by our partner QLBS in New Zealand. This study also had the support or moral support from the Global Benchmarking Network, ISO Technical Committee 176, and International Academy for Quality. In the early days of the study, they all thought it was a great idea, and were okay with us listing their involvement in it. Since that time, this study has really been supported in large part by the over 400 volunteer research professionals around the world that have been involved and willing to send an invitation to participate in the study to their contacts. And so in this past year, we've not only issued the final report, but we've also been taking a look at some of the high responding organizations to this study and have been creating snapshots of those countries in a short blog and also more detailed presentation like this one. And we're able to dive a little bit deeper just to show the statistics that we have. And in this instance, this for Canada. And these, meanwhile, there's other high responding countries around the world. We've done the same sort of thing when these more detailed presentations are being done in other countries as well. Here's just a snapshot of the organizational excellence framework that was this integrated model that was used to do the study. It takes the principles and practices that are defined in leading excellence models, EFQM, Baldrige, the Canadian model, and the Australian model, and it puts it all in one place. And it adds to these definitions with implementation guidelines for the user. This had actually been a gap in the literature, and now we've really got something robust that is beneficial not only to the excellence community, but the working population as well. And if you take a look at the diagram of the organizational excellence framework, you'll see the 9 principles that characterize a culture that's committed to excellence on the inside of these 3 rings. And then you'll see the 9 key management areas on the second and third ring moving outward that describe key management areas, but all within those management areas are all these best management practices that comprise the areas. And in total, if we take a look at this, there are 102 best management practices in total, and these would apply to organizations with more employees, over 25 employees. We generally use that as a rule of thumb. But in the case of micro-sized organizations with 1 to 25 employees, there's just 51 practices that we ask them to take a look at to see if they've got them in place and to what extent they've been deployed. And the automated assessment reporting tool that we have automatically defaults to micro size or a larger size of organization, depending on the number of employees that are input into the system. So the data that's been collected during this study is really broken down by role or 4 positions: leadership, management, staff, and other. And an other might be positions such as a board member. By size, and we've got micro size with 1 to 25 employees, small with 26 to 100, medium with 101 to 999, and large with 1,000 plus. The type of organization, whether it be government, business, or nonprofit. The industry sector, and we've got 21 industry sectors that are defined by the International Standard Industrial Classification. And there are 218 countries. And we haven't had all 218 countries and the respondents that we had hoped for to date, but we have had enough to be able to collapse the data to provide some pretty good feedback on 7 regions of the world using the World Bank grouping. Ideally, we'd like to target 9,000 respondents. So far, we've got 1,079. And we're well on our way, but we still got some work to do for this to be an absolutely statistically significant sample size. In the case of Canada, we certainly do have enough respondents to draw some pretty firm conclusions. And these respondents have been kind enough to participate in the 2 assessments that we've offered. One is on the culture, and the other is the full assessment on the culture and the best management practices. So far, we've been sharing the results along the way on the Organizational Excellence Technical Committee LinkedIn site, in newsletters of various organizations, and we've even had some presentations at international conferences in a variety of countries. Both the members of the technical committee and also some of the volunteer researchers have been participating in this, and all taking an opportunity to make presentations. And these presentations are being done by some of our in-house researchers as well in the various countries around the world. So it's really good in that we're spreading the word about excellence models. We're spreading the word about the current state of excellence that we have in the world today. And this is a project, of course, that is meant to benefit not only the excellence community, but the working population at large. We're not only uniting the quality profession on a common project, but we're really encouraging the working population to think about their improvement journey and educating them about an excellence model so they can use it to their advantage. We're encouraging organizations to compare their performance or current state with others, and to consider the extent to which they have these principles and best management practices in place, and next steps that they can take to better their organization. If you think about it, if more organizations participate in this sort of effort and can improve their performance, we've got a better economy, better trade picture, all trickling into better resident quality of life. So it's, in many ways, it's a way of making the world a better place for future generations if we can get the working population to embrace this sort of working and get the results that come along with it. Now, on the teaser assessment, as a reminder, was the assessment on the culture of excellence in an organization, the degree to which employees are committed to excellence and that organization always improving and getting better. And for this teaser assessment, we used a subjective rating scale. We wanted to know what was the gut feel people had about the culture of excellence in their organization, and we asked them to self-assess using a subjective scale that ran from low to medium to high. And we asked them, to what extent are these characteristics in your organization, part of your organization, the way you work together? And in total, 791 respondents completed the teaser assessment, and we had a really good cross-section by industry sector and the 7 regions. And we got the leadership and management roles, and we even had a number of staff and other roles responding. It was interesting that it was mostly the business sector that responded to the assessment, followed by government and nonprofit. And when we took a look at size of organization, it was predominantly the micro-size organizations that were pretty enthusiastic about this, followed by large, medium, and small size. In Canada, we had 174 respondents, which represented 22% of the total number of respondents. And we saw a similar picture. You know, leaders and management responding, mostly micro-size organizations, from the business community, nice, balance between manufacturing and service organizations. And there were certain industry sectors that figured more predominantly, and those included the financial and insurance sector, human health, information and communication, manufacturing, the professional, and public administration. And here's the results. As a high-level results on the 9 principles that are running down the left-hand side of the chart. This is how Canada compared to other countries. Canada is in blue and other countries are indicated by the red bars. So for Canada, most of the principles were rated quite positively, in the medium to medium high range. And this was very favorable. And so as we look down the 9 principles and we take a look at the ratings, we see that the highest rated principles in Canada were focus on the customer and leadership involvement. And the lowest rated were prevention-based process management and data-based decision-making. Canada's results really paralleled those of other countries, but they were slightly higher for 3 principles, being leadership involvement, focus on the customer, and societal commitment, and slightly lower on the remaining 6 principles. A handy tool that you might want to take a look at is on the homepage of our website, and it's called Interrelationships. And if you are doing this as sort of assessment and you notice that you've got a low rating on certain of these principles, such as, let's say database decision making, you can use this interrelationships document that identifies all the really direct relationships between these principles and all the best management practices in the model. And so you can look at those touch points for database decision making, and anything that would be low rated being indicated as something you need to work on in order to buoy up the rating in this area. So there's just a handy tool for you to consider using. Now, this is what the results were by role. Leadership and other roles, which could be board members to an organization, they provided higher ratings as compared to those in management and staff roles. And Canada's ratings are slightly lower than other countries, with the exception of the other role. When we take a look at the type of organization, business organizations provided higher ratings on the principles, followed by nonprofit and government. And this tendency, as we looked at the 9 principles, persisted, but we did see some exceptions, and that was for the principle of continuous improvement, where business and nonprofit ratings were similar, and for the principle of societal commitment, where the nonprofit had the highest rating. As we look at organization size, micro-size organizations had the highest rating, followed by large, small, and medium size. And micro-size organizations in Canada also had slightly higher rating than their counterparts in other countries. But for small, medium, large size organizations in other countries, they had slightly higher ratings than their counterparts in Canada. As we look at general industry sectors, manufacturing versus service, we see that the service sector rated the principles just slightly higher than the manufacturing sector. And once again, the ratings for Canada were slightly below those of other countries. This is a look at the ratings by specific industry sector. This is where we had, enough organizations to draw some conclusions. And we see that the professional, scientific, and technical sector and the financial and insurance sectors had the highest overall rating. And the construction and public administration sectors have the lowest. On the individual principles, as we looked at each of these sectors, we saw that leadership involvement was highly rated by 2 sectors, being the financial and insurance sector and the professional, scientific, and technical sector, and that we had lower ratings for public administration, for prevention-based process management, and data-based decision-making. And the construction sector also showed the lower rating for data-based decision-making. So there's some food for thought for those particular sectors. In comparison to regions around the world, Canada had the same rating as North America and also Latin America and the Caribbean. And you see that East Asia and Pacific had the highest rating overall on the principles. Sub-Saharan Africa also had a high rating, but there's some caution there given the number of respondents. Some very memorable comments from the teaser assessment were from leaders of organizations that talked about how running through the self-assessment really gave them more perspective on what they needed to be doing in their organization for it to grow and develop and become more successful, so they could leave a good legacy for their kids and grandkids. And another individual said, gee, we seem to be kind of adrift at the moment, and maybe there's some reason for that. So we got to take a closer look at these best practices that are common to high-performing organizations with a view to this being helpful to us in terms of improving our situation. And some more comments, one from an individual that were celebrating the strengths that they had in their organization, about their aim, their clear objectives, you know, the staff, the teamwork, the quality of their work. I mean, some things going great. And another individual saw some opportunities, you know, that they need to take more suggestions from the floor staff, because they're the ones working there um, on a continual basis, and likely have great ideas about how to do the work much better. And so this is an area that they recognized as they went through this assessment that might be very, very helpful to them. Now, on the full assessment, this is where we used a much more objective rating scale when the respondents were self-assessing how they were doing against various statements of best practices, from just beginning to good start to doing well to high performing. And when they used this more objective scale, they were taking a look at each of these best management practices, and they were taking a look at whether or not there was a systemic approach being used throughout the organization, the degree to which it had been deployed throughout the organization, whether that particular practice was well understood by employees, whether they were getting good results with that practice, and where the mindset was. Was it focused on correction, prevention, or continuous improvement? In total, we had 238 respondents that completed the full assessment, and that represented 18 industry sectors and 7 regions. So we're getting off to a good start there in terms of the global assessment. And for Canada, there were 41 respondents, which represented 17% of the total population. And once again, the profile of the organizations that are responding to these assessments, it was mostly leadership and management, which we wanted. We had a predominance of micro-sized organizations and organizations from business, and a nice cross-section from service and manufacturing, and similar industry sectors that as I had mentioned before, the professional, information and communication, human health, manufacturing, public administration were higher responding. And so we saw that same sort of thing happening again, but overall we had a pretty good cross section as we looked at, you know, size, industry sector, and industry general sector and specific sector. So we're off to a pretty good start. As we take a look at the 9 key management areas, there was some very interesting results here. Number one, there's quite a drop between how organizations rated how they were doing on the principles or the culture compared to how they rated on the key management areas. And the key management areas, of course, this is a lot more in depth because there's so many practices involved throughout an assessment like this. So the overall ratings dropped a fair bit by comparison. And for Canada, the average ratings for the key management areas were in the good start range, which is wonderful. From that range runs from 2.5 to 5, and this was across the key management areas for the most part, with the exception of governance, which was in the doing well range, which had ratings between 5.1 and 7.5. So they're in the lower end of that doing well range. So once again, in comparison to the principles, these key management areas were rated quite a bit lower. But that was the same finding that we had for all the countries around the world. This was just something that we found while doing this assessment. For Canada, the highest rated key management area was governance. And then the lowest ratings were shared by several areas, including planning, work processes, suppliers and partners, resource management, and continuous improvement and performance measurement. And once again, the ratings for Canada were below other countries. Now, taking a look at each one of these key management areas in a little bit more detail, we see the practices that are included in each of these areas and the ratings that organizations provided. Governance happened to be the highest rated area for Canada, and all the ratings were below those of other countries except for 1.3, which was all about ensuring that the governance system meets obligations such as legal, financial, ethical, and reporting. And on this particular statement, there was the same rating for Canada and other countries. And this is a particularly important practice because as we look at the assessment for micro-sized organizations, this is the one and only governance practice that really applies to smaller organizations. So it's one of those practices you really want to make sure you've got in place in an organization. And we see that it's got a nice, healthy rating here in the doing well category. In the leadership area, there's quite a few more practices to consider. There's 15 in total. And we see that the highest rated practice for Canada was leadership's showing responsibility, demonstrating real responsibility to society and the environment. Leadership also emphasizing, the importance of teamwork and the commitment to continuous improvement. So those are the highest rated practices, 2.14, 2.10, and 2.7. But the lowest rated were 2.11, which was communicating openly with employees about performance, and 2.13, which is making sure that senior management rewards were linked to organizational performance to help reinforce the importance of that. And with the exception of 2.10 and 2.14, the ratings on leadership practices for Canada were generally below those of other countries. Generally, it's important to mention that a lot of these practices are in somewhat of a chronological order. So if you take a look at where an organization is performing well and where they need to improve, you want to keep that in mind as you scan down the list of the practices. So for example, in leadership here, we really want to make sure that there's corporate statements in place, that those statements have been communicated to employees, that you've developed a strategic plan and you're monitoring and reviewing that plan on a regular basis. These are things that are really top of mind in the leadership area. And as an organization, becomes more sophisticated and their management system becomes more sophisticated, some of these other practices come into play as well. Similarly, in the planning area, this area is all about business planning and using good information in the planning process, creating a plan with goals and objectives, and communicating that plan throughout the organization. And it's also about developing contingency plans for unforeseen events and how to allocate and reallocate resources to get the plan done. So for Canada, the highest rated practice in the planning area was all about, allocating resources, 3.5, and reallocating resources to assist with meeting the goals and objectives. And the lowest rated practice was 3.6, which is conducting a capability gap analysis for resources, and 3.3, preparing contingency plans for unforeseen events, and 3.8, which was monitoring and reviewing that business plan on a regular basis. So with the exception of 3.7, all of the practices in the planning area were below those of other countries for Canada. In the customers area, this is where we use research to define and segment our customers, and we really strive to understand their needs, wants, and expectations so that we can communicate the value of products and service to them, and you can align employees on the importance of serving the customer well. And in this particular area, the highest rated practice was 4.4, which is aligning employees on the importance of the customer. But the lowest rated practice was 4.1, which is at conducting research to really understand who is the customer and what do they want, need, and expect, you know, at the very beginning. So some work that needs to be done there. On the employee side of things, there's quite a few practices in this area. There's 12 practices in total, and this is where we've got practices in place to recruit, select, develop, train, reward, and recognize employees, help them to be the best that they can be. And this is where we encourage them to share their ideas and suggestions and be innovative and be part of improving in an organization. And of course, we reward and recognize them for their performance. And we try to remove barriers that are getting in their way. In this particular area for Canada, the highest rated practice was 5.3, which was in ensuring that there was equal opportunity and diversity in the organization. And the lowest rated practice was in encouraging employees to be innovative and to take calculated risks. Once again, all the employee ratings for Canada were below other countries, particular 5.4, which was you know, ensuring that all the employees in an organization really understood what the strategic plan was and committed to it. In the work processes area, this is where we're designing and documenting the way work is done, and we're monitoring and controlling those work processes, analyzing and improving them. We're taking corrective action if things don't go quite as planned, or looking how to prevent the recurrence of problems. And we're looking at not only what we're doing inside organizations, but we're taking a look outside as well to learn from others. In this particular area, the highest rated practice for Canada was 6.5, and that was taking corrective action when problems occur. And the lowest rated was 6.9, which was involving stakeholders in designing and analyzing work processes. And those stakeholders could be customers, employees, suppliers, and partners. So a very, very important practice. Most of the practices show the same trends if we take a look at the ratings between Canada and other countries, but with the exception of 6.10, where Canada had a slightly higher rating, and this is on benchmarking or using external data to compare, you know, and learn from others. In the suppliers and partners area, there's 5 practices, and it's very important who we select that we want to work with on the basis of criteria, how we develop win-win partnering arrangements with them, how we share information with them about our business plans and strategic plans, and how we work with them to develop new products and services or social and environmental standards that exceed what's legislated. And here for Canada, the highest rated was practice 7.2, developing those win-win partnering arrangements. And the lowest rated was 7.4 and 7.5, which is working closely with the suppliers and partners on new products and services or social and environmental standards that went beyond those legislated. So there's some you can see where the opportunities for improvement are here, where Canada is doing, you know, fairly well, and where there needs to be some attention. In the resource management area, this is all the resources that an organization has to consider outside of employees. And so resources pertains to facilities, assets, technology, knowledge that we want to retain, transportation that we use, and these sorts of resources. So if you take a look at this area, there's 8 practices that you want to see in place, of course, there's not as many for micro-sized organizations, but the defining the resource requirements, of course, is pretty important for everybody. And then we see that at the top of the list. For Canada, the highest rated practice in this area was 8.3, which was managing the security of resources. and the lowest rated was 8.8, which was preparing for resource interruptions. So once again, ratings in Canada are slightly below their counterparts in other countries, but particularly for 8.8 on the resource interruptions and 8.5, and this is where it comes to maintenance and utilization of assets, to increase their life cycle. In the continuous improvement area, this is where we sit back and we reflect on how we're doing in all these key management areas and take stock of where we really need to focus effort. What are we going to work on in the upcoming year? And the highest rated in this area was customers, and the lowest rated was the resource management. And if we take a look at performance measures that are used across key management areas, and just a little tip here, in the Organizational Excellence Framework publication that you can download at no charge, there's a great list of performance measures that are used across these areas that are used by high-performing organizations around the world. And it's really good to take a handful of these measures to assess when you're assessing the performance in your own organization, because then you can use these results to compare to others and learn from high-performing organizations. So when we take a look at the types of measures that are being used in Canadian organizations, this area happened to be the lowest rated area of all the key management areas. And the highest rated area where measurement is occurring is in the planning area. And an example of a measure might be, well, to what degree do people have an understanding about the business plan in the organization? And on the flip side, the lowest rated area of measurement was that on governance. And an example of a governance measure might be, what is the stakeholders' perception of governance in this organization? So there's just examples of where Canada was doing better or may want to pay some attention. And once again, all of these ratings were below other countries, particularly in the governance area. Now, on this last slide of the results, this is where we're taking a look at performance measures that we use for the organization as a whole. And there are 12 measures noted here. If we're just considering micro-size organizations, there's 4 measures that they should be using, and that's 9.3.5 for the quality of products or services, 9.3.7 for customer satisfaction, 9.3.10 for employee satisfaction, and 9.3.12 financial measures. So for all size organizations, you want to make sure you're at least using these measures to provide feedback on performance and to help you make good decisions on where to concentrate effort. But for larger size organizations, you can be using a handful of these measures in order to provide that sort of feedback. For Canada, the highest rated measure was 9.3.5 on the quality of products and services, and 9.3.9 customer confidence. And both these were quite close to the ratings provided by other countries. But the lowest rated was 9.3.4, which was whether the community perceived the organization to be a model of excellence or an employer of choice. And that's pretty important to be able to measure that, and good feedback to get from community on the perception there. So again, some food for thought about where Canada's doing well, where it could be improving. Some memorable comments that we had from the respondents. There was certainly a sense that respondents felt value in going through the survey. It gave them more to think about. Reinforced, okay, gee, yeah, we're doing some of these things well, but boy, there's some other things that maybe we haven't been doing well, and here's some opportunity for us. And they were seemed to be very eager to be able to see how they measured up and how they compared to others. So that was very, very encouraging. And this is where we turn to the big question, are you ready to roll up your sleeves, Canada? And, with these results, what are we going to do? We know a little bit more about where we're doing well and where we can improve. And so what's next? Overall, at a high level, I think organizations are wise to use a tried and true process, something that has been validated by research over the last close to 30 years now. We know that excellence models work. We know that the principles and practices that are common to high-performing organizations are those that work well and help you get good results. So if you don't know about this, by all means, learn about it. Download that publication at no charge. You've got all the definitions there. You've got implementation guidelines. And if you need to learn more about it, of course, there's workshops that can help you do that. Take the assessment, see how you measure up, then turn and compare how you measure up to other organizations by size and industry sector, by country, if you're able to, if we've got enough data there, and then look to improve. And a lot of your improvement is going to come from your employees, those people doing the work, the ideas and suggestions they have about how to do the work better. And the other part of improvement is going to come from those high-performing organizations. We see them in amongst the award recipients of National Excellence Awards, and we know about those in our community that are high-performing. They may not have applied for an award, but we know that they're a high-performing, well-respected organization. And so learn from those high performers, because you can learn from their best practice. You can learn about how they approach and how do they deploy, and maybe some of the results that they've been getting. And there's an awful lot that you can learn just by studying those organizations. Here's some more information about why you might want to take this pretty seriously. And we take a look at some of the statistics about excellence models and what we've learned about the return on investment, and it builds a pretty good business case. So one of the numbers that really jumps out at me here is how much of payroll is really being spent on non-value adding activities, things like errors and rework and duplication and sources of customer dissatisfaction. And so we want to eliminate that. And you can do that by putting a good management system in place that you get with an excellence model. Excellence models really provide a formula for success. This is something that I have noted in reading through the research over the last 30 years, and this is something I've noted working directly with organizations to help them improve their performance. It's a formula for success. If you implement these best management practices that you find in an excellence model, you're going to develop a culture that is committed to excellence. And then that culture is going to help you achieve exceptional results, because those employees are always looking at what are we doing now and how can we do it better. And so you see these exceptional results running across a balanced system of measurement. So with that, I'd like to answer a few questions that have popped up in the chat box, and respond as best I can, and open to anyone that wants to contact me for further dialogue. The first question is about statistically significant results of this study. Are they statistically significant? Well, I'll start by saying that our target to get a global sample size that was significant was 9,000 respondents overall. And we've got a good start with our 1,079 respondents. And we've been able to draw some conclusions from the assessment, the teaser assessment, and the full assessment. Not exactly where we want to be, but we're striving for those 9,000 respondents by continuing the study. But one thing I'll note is I didn't see the data changing too much in some respects as we were nearing the end of the point at which we summarized the report for the report that was issued in April 2019. So that indicated to me that we were nearing a point where we could make some statements about the findings. In addition to that, those 9,000 respondents that we're striving for overall, we also took a look throughout the study at how many respondents we needed by population, country populations. And if you're taking a look at, up to 15 million, well, 25 respondents is good. Between 15 and 55 million, 35 respondents is good. And 55 million plus 45 respondents is good. And so in the case of Canada, we had 41 respondents to the full assessment and 174 to the teaser assessment. I think we've got a pretty good sample size there to draw some conclusions. So I do feel quite confident about these Canadian results. And some will question too, is self-assessment as good as an external assessor coming in with that independent objective viewpoint? I think what I've found is that, when I've gone into organizations and done an external assessment, you come away, with your observations, your ratings, your open-ended comments. But it's also very good to do a self-assessment with employees in an organization, because they provide ratings and open-ended comments that really tell the story. And it's a very, very rich source of data and information. And I find that the feedback that we get through self-assessment is very, very good. So I wouldn't discount this method too much. It's also the method we pretty well had to use because there was no budget for the study. And so we had to think about this, way that we could do this study with $0 and all of our wonderful volunteer researchers. So this is the method that we chose, and I think so far the results are pretty darn good. The second question was, do you think that Canadian respondents were more critical or more honest than other respondents? Because as we've noted, the ratings are lower. And I don't know that they were. I take a look at the ratings. I take a look at the open-ended comments for all of the respondents, and my experience over the past 30 years. And I think that this is a good assessment of where we're at in Canada. I think I've noticed over the last number of years, my work here and my work abroad, that in Canada we might be slipping a little bit. So I would really recommend that organizations ensure that they have a really good management system in place. And that's provided by excellence models, because this really offers you a platform for long-term success, as opposed to maybe using quick fixes or flavors of the week that might provide you short-term results. So that's my advice there. And other observations I've made by working, at home and abroad, is that there's some really good work going on around the world. We've got governments that are striving to be high-performing governments. We've got businesses wanting to be competitive and profitable. And we've got a lot of organizations that are benchmarking and learning from the best practices of others in order to get better and better and better. And if you look at various indexes around the world and countries who are at the top of the list, you've got to ask yourself, how often are we seeing Canada? Is Canada slipping once in a while? And an example of a country that we often see at the top of the list is Singapore. Singapore is an example of a country that's done a very, very good job in this respect. And the third question is how COVID-19 is going to change the perspective towards excellence and transformation. Well, I'd say take a look at that final report that was issued on April 2019 and think about the strengths and think about the opportunities for improvement that were cited for organizations around the world, and think about this marketplace interruption that we've experienced, and reflect on some of the practices that are there and some of the examples that we see in the marketplace as we've been observing what's been happening. Think about, are we using data-based decision making in healthcare and government? Do we have contingency plans for unforeseen events? Have we been able to adapt to changing circumstances? What organizations have, what have not? Are we learning from other organizations through best practice in the pandemic? Are we doing benchmarking? Have we done a capability gap analysis for resources? Are we getting employees to share their ideas and suggestions? Are we involving suppliers and partners in the development of new products and services? Have we been identifying technology that we can be using that's going to provide benefit to the organization right now? Are we prepared for resource interruptions? And what is the organizational's capability to manage change? I mean, these are just a selection of the practices that jump out at me as I reflect on organizations' response to the pandemic and the things that are going on in the marketplace. There's a real opportunity for improvement here to help us respond much better to situations like this, and by learning from best practice and benchmarking examples, by making sure that organizations have these practices in place at all levels of government, business, and nonprofit. I think we'd all be much better off for it. And I think there's going to be a fair bit written about this pandemic in the future about the way organizations have responded and the costs and the benefits. And so I'll save any more comments on that for now. Thank you very much for your kind attention. I've enjoyed presenting today, and I look forward to you reaching out should you have any additional questions. And I'm pleased to share a copy of this recorded presentation and a copy of the slides from today so that you can reflect on the data. And once again, thanks on behalf of myself, thanks on behalf of Veronica. She's going to be providing this presentation again in French in November, so be sure to tune in, those of you who speak the language of French. And there's a note just at the bottom of the slide here about the full report being available on our website under the Global OE Index tab. And there you'll also find a few country snapshots. So I'd encourage you to take full advantage of that and reach out with any questions. I figure we're all in it together, and those of us that work in quality or work with organizations to improve performance, this is a job that we can all do together to help organizations raise the bar and help countries raise the bar. Thank you very much.